You've probably heard that in order to have a successful show, you have to hit the Apple Podcast charts or you have to hit the podcast charts. That's actually not true. There are ways to have a successful show beyond just reaching those charts. And yes, while that can feel good, they don't always translate to money, which is what business owners are looking for, or even credibility as a thought leader. That's what you're looking for. Hitting a chart won't mean that you're automatically going to be picked for a speaking engagement, and it's not going to mean that your audience is going to buy from you. It's important that we look at charts, yes, as a way to talk about the success of our show, to be excited about the success of our show, but it goes so much deeper than that. Hello and welcome to another episode of Successful Podcasting Unlocked. I'm your host, Alicia Galati. I'm the founder of Galati Media, a full-service podcast management agency where we help business owners launch and maintain lead-generating podcasts. Today's question is, how important is it to hit the podcast charts? While hitting a podcast chart can make you feel really good and you can use it as a marketing strategy, it doesn't always mean that you actually have a good concept for your podcast, and it doesn't mean that you are going to have a hugely successful show. First and foremost, how do the podcast charts work? There's a little bit of science and a little bit of guessing that goes into it, but most of the time it has to do with the number of downloads you're getting, the reach of your audience, if you're reaching into other countries, what your influence is. It factors in all of these little elements to create a chart. Now, is it hard to rank a podcast? The answer to that is a huge and resounding no, especially if you're looking at the charts across the world. You might be thinking, wait a minute, I thought there were just the Apple Podcast charts, and that is it. No. There are several ways that you can check podcast charts. So here are a few of my favorite ways. One, I like to go to Apple Podcast charts and look at those. Two, looking at Spotify's charts. Third, looking at Chartable. So if you go to Chartable's site, it will actually send you to Chartable's charts. That was weird to say, but then it also sends you to Apple Podcast charts and Spotify charts. So it can have all of three of those in one spot. So that's where I recommend you look first. Another place to look for podcast charts is something that you probably weren't even considering or even knew existed, and that is Goodpods. Goodpods allows listeners to very easily rate and review not just podcasts as a whole, but podcast episodes. People can leave comments or interactions or hearts on episodes. It's free to use. It's very easy. But what this does is it allows you to reach a further and deeper audience and engage with them in a really meaningful way. If you have people interacting with you on places like Goodpods, it is very easy to have a top 100 podcast. So if you are sending your audience to Goodpods to leave ratings and reviews, to follow your podcast, you can rank very easily over there. And you can still use that as a marketing strategy, saying you're a top 100 podcast or a top 50 podcast in your category, because that is something that you have been able to do on that podcast chart. Those are the different places that you can look. Going back to that question, is it easy to rank? Yes. First and foremost, like we talked about, Goodpods is a very easy place to rank your podcast because there's not a lot of people interacting or engaging on all of the podcasts, even the big ones. So it makes it very easy for your podcast to rank. Another way that you can very easily rank is internationally, like I said. But if you're in the United States, you might see that when you go on your Apple Podcast charts in the app, you are only seeing the ratings and reviews for those that live in the United States. Chartable is a great way to be able to see international reviews. Our clients have ranked in the top 100 in over 50 countries. That is incredible. And it allows us to use that data to say, hey, we have some pretty incredible clients and we're helping them produce really incredible shows. Now, what that doesn't translate to, though, is them achieving their goals. If your goal is to hit a podcast chart, cool. But what are you going to do with that information? What are you going to do after you hit that chart? Are you going to continuously be striving to stay on that chart? There's a lot of factors that go into it that you can't always control. So what are some things and ways that you can create goals that you can actually control? We've talked about this before on the podcast. There are 4 key places where we tend to see people focus on for their podcast goals. That is conversion, impact, growth, and engagement. Ranking on a podcast chart might be part of your impact strategy, but what else are you doing in order to create an impact? What other strategies are you implementing? If you're only focusing on one, you're not going to achieve that overall goal of reaching a bigger audience. If your focus is so solely on hitting those charts, how are you focusing on the inside of your content? Is it good content? Are you talking yourself in circles? Is your audience really not engaging? Or are they only engaging because you're you or because someone told them to go listen? It's really important that as podcasters, we have strategies and goals in place that are meant to drive business. If you're looking to use your podcast as a thought leadership platform, it is imperative that you are clear that you are using it that way, that you are showing up as an expert. You're not going to be able to reach podcast goals easily with just a solo show. And that's okay, because your goal is to create an impact. Your goal is to be seen as a thought leader. And if your podcast does that, then what do the charts really matter? If you are a business owner and you are using your podcast to generate leads, how are you tracking that? Are you saying, okay, this new lead came from the podcast. This new lead came from the podcast. Or are you saying, I have to hit those podcast charts in order to be seen as a valid podcaster, to be seen as a valid business owner? No, you should be tracking the information that really matters. Focus on what actions are actually going to move you closer to your goals. The value is in high quality, consistent content. Yes, you might hit charts along the way, and you can use that as marketing tools, create a bit of fear of missing out for other people. If they see that it's a top 10% podcast or a top 10 in the category, oh no, I want to listen to it. Who else is listening to it? That's really cool. That's great. You can use those as strategies, but make sure you are creating quality, consistent content that is moving your listener in the direction that you want them to be going. And you don't have to rank to do that. I've mentioned this on past episodes, but I want to share this story with you. We had a client that had less than 150 downloads every episode, and they still were able to sell out their stuff. It's about being clear with your audience. It's about reaching your audience in a really impactful way and showing up for them with content that is helpful, with content that is helping them move from where they are now to where they want to go. That is what makes the difference. If you are struggling with figuring out how your goals tie into your overall strategy, I highly recommend that you book a strategy session with me, or you can even hire us. At Galati Media, we actually offer strategy to all of our clients. It is included in the price. You get to have someone who's working on your podcast to make it better, make it sound incredible, creating all that content, including the marketing. But you also have me in your back pocket to email, to talk to get strategy ideas from. And every month we can meet to make sure that you are making the most of your podcast. If you have your own podcasting questions, I would love to answer them. You can go to Successful Podcasting Unlocked to submit your questions to be answered on a future episode, or you can go to Instagram, send me a DM. Until next time, happy podcasting.